I never thought that I would be the person to get pregnant with an IUD, and I never expected what came next. So grab your popcorn, crack open your can of soda, because I'm about to give you all the details of my IUD pregnancy. Before I dive in, I do want to mention that this video touches on the topic of miscarriage. So if you're in a tender place, please feel free to skip this video or come back at a later date, and I'm sending you so much love. The story all began after I had my son in 2023. I really struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety, and I was also dealing with something very difficult in my personal life. So I was really at a low point with my mental health, and I was absolutely struggling. I began taking an antidepressant in November of 2023, and that is when I knew that I could not have another baby anytime soon. My biggest focus was taking care of my mental health. I wanted to make sure that I was healed and whole and healthy for my son and for my husband, and I wanted to show up as the best version of myself. So I knew that my next step was to start some form of birth control. I did initially deny getting on any kind of birth control at my 6-week checkup because I personally did not really like my experience with being on the pill before I had my son. So I did my research, and after looking at all my options, I felt like the IUD was probably the best decision for me. Not only is it like 99.99% effective, but it's also something that just gets implanted and I don't have to worry about it, and the hormones would be localized to my uterus instead of going through my whole body and affecting me like the pill did. So at the end of November of 2023, I got my IUD placed. Now, getting it placed really wasn't that bad. I had a Foley balloon when I was induced with my son, so maybe a sensation like that was something I was kind of desensitized to. Everything went as expected, and I felt fine besides some light cramping. And then I had to go back in January of 2024 to get the placement checked, and I was cleared. Everything was good. But just a few weeks later in February, I felt like I needed to take a pregnancy test. I wasn't very good at tracking my period, especially since I had an IUD, but I felt like I was like a day or two late. So I went to the store, I grabbed 2 different kinds of tests, and they were both positive. Yeah, I was kind of shocked. So I called my doctor, and they wanted me to come into the office to check on the placement of my IUD. When I went to the doctor, they started with a regular pregnancy test, and it did come back as negative. And then it detected an ultrasound, and thankfully my IUD was in place, so there was no concern there. And then I met with an NP, and she said that the ultrasound indicated no signs of pregnancy. She did also have me do some blood work so that she could check my HCG level, and it came back as 0. The first explanation was that maybe the pregnancy test just didn't work correctly, and that's why they came back as positive. But because I used tests from 2 different brands, we decided that it could have been a chemical pregnancy. However, I still wonder what actually happened, and I was left with more questions than answers. Months went by and life went back to normal, except for I was dealing with major bloating from the IUD. But by September of 2024, I felt so off. I can't quite explain the feeling, but there's almost just like this shift happens inside your body whenever you become pregnant. And I started to feel super tired, and it was very reminiscent of how I felt when I was pregnant with my son. I knew deep down that I had to be pregnant. So I went to the store and I got a pregnancy test, and it came back positive. I was honestly in disbelief, and I threw out this theory that my IUD just somehow causes me to have positive pregnancy tests. I decided to go to the store, and I got 2 other brands, including a digital test, and they all came back positive. I called my doctor, and this time they wanted me to come in and do some blood work so that they could check my levels, so that's what I did. I went into the office and they checked my HCG and progesterone levels, and a few hours later I saw that the results had posted in my patient portal, and being the nosy person that I am, I had to look at it and see what it said. My HCG was at a 6 and my progesterone level was at a 2.3. Now, I had no idea what that meant, so to Google I went. From what I was reading online, it was suggesting that I may just be in very early pregnancy, and that's what I was hoping for. Seeing those positive pregnancy tests really made me feel excited and hopeful. I really liked the idea of having another baby and imagining my son becoming an older brother. But that excitement quickly dissolved when my doctor's office called me later that afternoon. My doctor's assistant called me, and she had let me know that my OB had looked over my lab results, and the results did indicate that I had gotten pregnant. However, the numbers were too low to deem a viable pregnancy. I was told that I had gotten pregnant, but I had miscarried, likely because of the IUD, and that I should expect to pass the pregnancy within the next couple of days. Although I only knew this baby for a couple of days, I was already falling in love with it and with the idea of being pregnant again. I prayed so hard that God would protect this baby and that I would have a happy, healthy, and safe pregnancy. but unfortunately that's not what happened. Hearing the word miscarriage shattered all hope that I had been holding on to. I cried so hard and I felt like I was losing it. I blamed myself and I felt so guilty for getting the IUD in the first place because I felt like I caused this to happen. And I really just felt like a fool for getting my hopes up so high. My husband was super supportive and he comforted me, and he honestly wasn't too affected by the news. He's somebody that usually assumes the worst, and he's a lot more of a realist than I am. So he already felt that because I had an IUD, the pregnancy probably wasn't going to be able to make it. The next morning when I woke up, I started to bleed, and that is when the grief set in. The whole situation felt so much more real to me because at this point there was nothing else that I could do anymore. About 3 weeks later, I went into my doctor's office because she wanted to check the placement of my IUD, and once again, it was perfectly in place. I then met with my doctor and she explained that sometimes things happen that are outside of our control, and that's why obviously they can't say the IUD is 100% effective. And even though I totally understand that, there is a part of me that put too much hope into the IUD, and I never expected that I would be part of that 0.000 whatever 1% that would experience a pregnancy with an IUD. I then told her that I was ready to get my IUD out. Having it was a lot more stressful than I thought it would be, and it also made me realize that I kind of did want another baby. So I got the IUD out in mid-October. Getting pregnant unexpectedly and then losing that pregnancy so quickly really did soften my heart toward having another baby. I was able to recognize the growth and healing that I experienced, and I felt for the first time actually ready to have another baby. And my husband felt the same way. We had already started loosely talking about growing our family in about August or so, but going through this experience really solidified for us that we wanted to have another baby. So we waited a few months before trying as advised by my OBGYN, and the very first month that we tried, we surprisingly got pregnant. I found out that I was pregnant right before Christmas, and I was so shocked that we got pregnant as quickly as we did. It felt strange, almost like surreal, as the grief gave way to hope, but I still had a lot of fear and I was absolutely terrified of having another miscarriage. I found out that I was pregnant at only 4 weeks along, so I kept taking so many tests until I went to my 8-week appointment, and seeing those lines get darker and darker and showing up even quicker every single time gave me so much more confidence, and it really strengthened my hope. There is part of me that does really grieve the life that I lost, and I'm so sad that I will never meet that baby on this side of heaven, but that experience led me to the life that I'm carrying now, and it has given me so much more appreciation for this baby that's coming so soon. I know some of you who are watching this may have also experienced an unexpected pregnancy or a loss, and I know that it can be so challenging and difficult and full of grief. My heart goes out to you, and I want you to know that you're not alone. I see you. If you're comfortable, I would really love for you to share your story down in the comments. Not only would I love to be able to connect with you, but this also lets other women out there who have experienced this know that they're not alone either. I so appreciate you watching this video, and I would also appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. I would love for you to stick around as I share the rest of this journey, from preparing for baby number 2 to navigating all the ups and downs of motherhood. Thank you so much for watching, and hey, YouTube thinks that you should check out one of these 2 videos. Bye!